Hi, maybe you've just created a Shopware 6 shop and now want to edit the basic settings. Today, I'd like to show you where to find them, why you should definitely take a look, and what options you have there. The best way is to just follow along, open your instance on a second screen or in a second tab, and pause this video in between, and I'll walk you through it. Now let's go to the settings in our administration. If you don't know how to get to the admin area yet, you can just log in with a /admin after your shop domain. But we'll assume you're already there and then click on settings here. Here we find the, well, I'd say still relatively new overview. If you're using an older Shopware version, it might be that this overview is structured a bit differently and that maybe 2 or 3 points are missing for you. Today we'll mainly focus on the basic information here. We'll go in there first. You can change really basic settings there that are, well, I'd say truly necessary for the shop. If you haven't looked in there at all yet, and really, well, started creating products and entering shipping options and so on right after installation and, well, haven't looked at that until now, then definitely click in there because you'll surely find 1 or 2 options that are quite relevant for you now. I'll click on it now, and what we see first is the selection of the different sales channels at the top. So I can say, hey, take all sales channels that are connected to my Shopware 6 installation. And the settings then apply to those. Or we say, hey, we'll take a specific sales channel and the settings then only apply to that one. You'll understand why. That is quite quickly later in the video. So now we can first of all set a shop name. We can also set the address. It's also important to know that this is, of course, the admin email, right? So where mailings could go later, for example. Below that, we also have the meta author and so on. I'd say these aren't the most important settings, but of course you can do that here as well. Then we can also mark the shop, I assume for search engines, as a family-friendly shop. We also have here later on a little help box where we can always check what exactly this point actually does in detail. And just as I suspected, it's a tag for search engines to show, hey, this isn't an adult shop, but it's also intended for children, for example. And anyone can take a look. Now we can also add the shop owner's address here. We can also add banking information and so on. So we can enter many things here, which we should, of course, enter if, well, it's relevant for us. Next, and here, for example, I think it's already super important that we have the distinction between the different sales channels at the top. By the way, if you don't know what sales channels are yet, there's also a relatively new video about this in our community hub and, of course, directly on YouTube. So feel free to take a look at that as well if you still, well, need more information. You can actually define the shop pages for individual sales channels here, so more or less the service pages. There are things like, for example, well, legal information, privacy pages, payment and shipping information. So all those things that you usually link somewhere down in the footer and so on, but also things that you don't link, for example, like a 404 page. If you want, for example, that when your customer accesses an area in your shop that doesn't exist, something specific to be displayed, then you can achieve that here by assigning a specific layout to this 404 page. It's important, of course, that you first create a layout for this in the content area and, well, of course, the content has to be created somewhere beforehand. The same applies, by the way, to the other things here. So, for example, if we were to say, hey, we want to go back to payment and shipping and would like something completely different there, we can, of course, edit the existing default page, but we can also go and create a completely new one and then simply select it here afterwards, save the whole thing, and then it would be stored for the respective sales channel or for all of them. Well, I'm not going to go into every single point that can be specified here, so this is mainly just about these shop pages and the various options behind them. Now we have a group box here for legal and compliance, which means we can still determine things here like, well, various settings for the cookie information. Do you need the first name in a contact form now or not? These are all things that are, of course, always necessary specifically for respective countries or just not, right? So definitely also talk to your own lawyer once about what is required in your own country. And then you can just check it here and implement it for yourself in the same way. So it's nice here too that you can differentiate between sales channels if you want, for example, that one sales channel is available for a completely different country, for example, and possibly then also takes place under different regulations and of course maybe with other products or, well, so on. At the very bottom, I can then define rules for the robots.txt. Now it goes a bit deeper. We can, for example, for those who don't know, define various rules via the robots.txt. We can allow or not allow certain things, what is accessible or what is not, what can be crawled by search engines and so on. I think there's also a small explanation for this here, and we can also just say disable default robots.txt as rules, so we can do that too if we want, and we can also just write more in here. Then we have captcha rules here. Well, we can of course use various ones that are already available as standard. You can also expand this area using extensions. There's quite a lot available in our store. I generally always recommend just leaving the honeypot active if, for example, an attacker tries to create various accounts in bulk in the storefront, then the honeypot would usually prevent that, because as soon as an invisible field is filled out, which bots usually do, then this security mechanism kicks in, so to speak, and the creation of the accounts is prevented. Of course, this is a very general explanation of this feature. There are also others here where you can, for example, and I think everyone's seen it before, enter a sequence of letters or numbers, or you have to click on symbols or other things just to prove that you're a human. This can then be set specifically for different sales channels here as well. Last but not least, we also have meta tags that we can create for the robots. It's a bit, well, I'd say beyond what we want to show here in this video. Basically, you can definitely still add tags there. If you don't know what that is, you can find more about it in our documentation where it's described in a bit more detail. And once we've finished editing the individual sales channels we have, or maybe even all of them at once, we can just click on Save at the top. The whole thing is saved and then takes effect immediately in the storefront. Accordingly, it's a really very simple window or module in the administration, but an incredibly powerful one, and you should definitely, if you've just done a fresh installation or even afterwards, take a look in here every now and then and see if you might want to adjust something after all. Yeah, because it's quite basic but has a big impact. And that's it for the video. I hope I was able to help you, and yeah, take care. Bye.